Imagine a field in Etruria, somewhere near the city of Tarquinia. Today this is central Italy, north of Rome. A farmer is plowing his land. Suddenly his plow hits something hard. He stops, looks down and sees, rising from the furrow, a figure. It is not a child and not an old man. It is something in between. It has the face of an infant, but the white hair of an elder. And it knows everything, the past, the present, the future. Its name is Tagies. The farmer screams in terror. People rush over. They stare at the strange creature, not knowing what to do. And Tagies begins to speak. He speaks about how the world is arranged, about how the gods send signs to men, about how to read those signs in lightning, in the flight of birds, and, most importantly, in the entrails of sacrificial animals. He speaks for a long time. The words flow as if someone is dictating them from beneath the earth. When he falls silent, he sinks back into the furrow and disappears. Forever. The people remember everything he said. They pass it to their children. They pass it to their children's children. This is how the teaching began. The discipline, as the Etruscans called it. The Romans would later call it the Etruscan science. And at the center of this science, the liver. Who were the haruspices? The word comes from Latin, haruspex. The exact meaning is the one who looks into the guts. It sounds crude, but for the ancients, this was a sacred science. A haruspex was a priest, but not an ordinary one. He did not serve in a temple every day. He was called in special cases, when an important decision had to be made, when an inexplicable omen appeared, when the city was in danger. He came, rolled up his sleeves, took a knife and did his work. First, he chose the victim, usually a sheep or a goat. The animal had to be perfect, no spots, no scars. If there was even one white mark on the wool, it was rejected. The animal could not resist. It had to go to the sacrifice calmly, as if it understood that it was serving a higher purpose. Then the haruspex cut its throat. The blood was collected in a bowl. Its color, thickness, even its smell, all mattered. But the main thing began after. He opened the abdominal cavity, fast, confident, without unnecessary movement. And he looked, first at the position of the organs, the liver, the heart, the lungs, the stomach, the gallbladder. Everything had to be in the right place. If something was out of position, that was already a bad sign. Then he took out the liver, placed it on his palm, studied its shape, its color, its surface. Smooth or bumpy, red or pale. Were there spots, growths, tears? Every detail meant something. A smooth, shiny liver. The gods were pleased. Pale, dry, expect disaster. A growth on the right side, victory. A growth on the left, defeat. A tear in a certain place, the death of a ruler. This was not improvisation. The haruspex had studied for years. He knew dozens, hundreds of signs. He held in his head a map of the liver, divided into zones. Each zone was connected to a specific god. And when he gave his verdict, no one argued. Not even Roman senators, not even consuls, not even emperors. Because the haruspex was not speaking for himself. He was transmitting the will of the gods. The most amazing discovery connected to the haruspices happened completely by accident. In the autumn of 1877, an Italian farmer was plowing a field near the city of Piacenza in northern Italy. His plow hit something hard. He stopped, dug into the soil, and found a bronze object. It was green from age, the size of a man's palm, covered with strange marks. The farmer did not know what he had found. He thought it was some kind of utensil, maybe a candlestick, maybe part of a harness. He took it home and put it in a shed. There it sat for months until someone told him, "Do you know what that is? It is a liver." The bronze liver of Piacenza is one of the most mysterious artifacts of antiquity. It is cast in bronze, with lines and Etruscan inscriptions carved on its surface. More than 30 names of gods are written on it. The entire liver is divided into 16 parts. Why 16? Because the Etruscans believed the sky was divided into 16 regions. Each region belonged to one god, and each god had a corresponding section of the liver. This is not just a model, it is a map of the world, a small bronze liver that reflected the structure of the universe. When the haruspex looked at the real liver of a sacrificial animal, he did not just see an organ, he saw a message from the gods. Where a growth appeared, a god was speaking. Where a spot appeared, a god was warning. Where a tear appeared, a god was angry. The bronze liver of Piacenza is now in the local archaeological museum. It survived 2,000 years in the ground, and then another century and a half in the hands of scholars. You can still read the names of the gods on it. Tinia, Uni, Minerva, the Etruscan versions of Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, and others whose names appear nowhere else except on this liver. But the liver is not the only amazing find. In the 1960s, archaeologists were digging in Turkey, in the city of Mari on the Euphrates, a city that stood 4,000 years ago. There they found clay models of livers molded by the hands of scribes. They also had inscriptions, also divisions into zones, also the names of gods, only different gods, Babylonian, Sumerian. This means that the haruspices did not invent their teaching from nothing. It came from the east, through the Phoenicians, through the Greeks, through the Etruscans. It traveled to Rome, and the Romans, who considered themselves the most practical people in the world, listened to priests who looked at livers. How did someone become a haruspex? This was not a profession you chose at 15. It was a calling passed down through families. Father taught son, grandfather taught grandson. Knowledge accumulated over centuries. Training lasted for years. The haruspex had to know not only the structure of the liver, but also the names of all the gods. Not only their names, but their characters. Not only their characters, but their favorite signs. He had to remember hundreds of cases. What happened last time the liver was pale? Last time there was a growth? Last time it was half the usual size? For this, there were schools. Yes, schools of haruspices. The most famous were in the Etruscan cities of Tarquinia and Capua. There the books were kept, the Libri Haruspicini, the books of the haruspices. In them all the rules, all the signs, all the interpretations were recorded. These books were not sold. They were not given to outsiders. This was a secret, closed to strangers. Students began with small things. First, they learned to choose the victim, then to slaughter it correctly, then to cut it open, then to extract the liver. Only after several years were they trusted to read the signs. But theory was as important as practice. The haruspex had to know not only what he saw, he had to know what it meant. For that, he had to understand how the world worked. The Etruscan discipline, the Etrusca disciplina, included 3 parts. The first was the interpretation of lightning. The second was the interpretation of entrails. The third was the rules of life, sacrifice, and city foundation. Even the founding of Rome, according to legend, did not happen without the haruspices. Romulus dug a trench, threw a clod of earth into it, and from there, just as Tejas once rose from the furrow, signs appeared. The city was founded correctly. meaning the gods were pleased. In 1904, archaeologists were digging in Egypt, in the oasis of El Karga in the southwest of the country. It is far from the Nile, in the middle of the desert. Tombs there had not been looted for centuries. In one of them, they found a mummy, ordinary, wrapped in linen bandages. But when they unwrapped it, they discovered that the bandages were not just cloth. They were a book. Papyrus, covered with Greek letters, cut into strips and wrapped around the body. The mummy was called the Mummy of El Karga, and the text preserved on it turned out to be a treatise on the haruspices. It was a textbook. It described in detail how to choose the animal, how to slaughter it, how to extract the liver, how to read it, and most importantly, how to interpret what was seen. This is a unique find because before it, everything we knew about haruspices came from Roman texts. Cicero, Pliny, Seneca, all of them wrote about the haruspices as outsiders, as strange Etruscan priests, but none of the Romans wrote a textbook. And here, a textbook, wrapped around a mummy like a final prayer. Who was this person? We do not know his name, but he was clearly a haruspex, or a teacher of haruspices. He took to his grave the most precious thing he had, not gold, not jewels, but knowledge. The text was not deciphered immediately. The Greek was damaged, the papyrus was worn, many words were erased, but scholars managed to read enough to understand. Haruspices in Roman Egypt were not rare. Their teaching had spread far beyond Italy. Even in the Egyptian desert, thousands of kilometers from Rome, someone was teaching students to read livers. But the most unexpected discovery happened not in Italy and not in Egypt. It happened in England in the 1920s. An archaeologist named Mortimer Wheeler was digging the ruins of a Roman city in Gloucestershire. He found many ordinary things: coins, potsherds, brooches. Then he found a small clay liver. Yes, clay, the size of a walnut. Lines and some signs were carved into it. Wheeler did not immediately understand what it was. He thought it was a child's toy or a craftsman's trinket. But he sent it to specialists and they said, "This is a model of a liver used by haruspices in Britain, in a Roman province, thousands of kilometers from Etruria." This meant that haruspices worked throughout the empire. They were invited to cities, to military camps, to the villas of wealthy Romans. British Celts, who had never heard of Etruscan gods, watched as a priest cut open a sheep and read the future from its liver. And they believed. Why did they believe? Because the Romans believed, and the Romans were the masters. But this belief was not blind. The haruspices gave specific answers. If you do this, you will win. If you do otherwise, you will lose. And when their predictions came true, their authority grew. And when they did not, they knew how to explain why they did not. The gods changed their minds. The sacrifice was wrong. The sign was misread. The haruspices never made mistakes. Those who listened to them made mistakes. Over time, the haruspices became an essential part of the Roman state machine. No important decision was made without consulting them. The Senate invited them before wars. Consuls invited them before battles. Emperors kept their personal haruspices at court. Julius Caesar, for example, received a warning from the haruspices. A few days before his death, they told him, "Beware the coming days." He did not listen. He was killed in the Senate. Claudius, the next emperor, on the other hand, respected the haruspices. He even tried to revive their teaching, which by that time was beginning to be forgotten. He wrote a book about Etruscan history. He founded a college of haruspices in Rome. He wanted this ancient science not to die, but it was dying. Christianity left no room for pagan priests. In the 4th century, Emperor Constantine banned sacrifices. In the 4th century, his successors banned consulting the haruspices. In the 5th century, the last schools closed. The haruspices disappeared, but their tools remained. The bronze liver from Piacenza, the clay models from Mari, the papyrus textbook from Egypt, the clay liver from England. They all sit in museums behind glass. Few visitors know what they really are. But they are maps of the world, keys to how the ancients understood the gods, reminders that people have always wanted to know the future, and that they were willing to cut open an animal to find it. In the next story, we will talk about divination by the flight of birds, about the Roman augurs who looked at the sky and decided whether to start a war. Thank you for listening. Rest well. The story continues.